Could we just have 1 minute of attunement, please? Starting now. Thank you very much, everybody. My name's Caroline Whittaker from Keighley and Ilkley Green Party, and this is the first time I've chaired a workshop, so hopefully I'll do it right. So before we start the discussion, I need somebody to report back to the main plenary session. Is anybody up for doing that? Yes, thank you very much. What's your name, please? Chris. Thank you. Have you got something to write? Note. Lovely. Thank you. And we also need somebody on the roving mic. Would anybody like to be the microphone distributor? Anybody? Do you want? Oh, sorry. Sorry. Are you all right? Yeah. I think you can take that one. Lovely. And finally, there's just one more thing. It's a special session today, which David will explain to you about because we've got some outside interaction.
Yes, this is one of the few experimental sessions where we're live streaming a workshop and people outside can type in questions which the chair can choose to ask or indeed not ask during this session. And at the end, if there's actually anyone, they can also take part in a straw poll. But I must say at the moment there's 0 people signed in.
Thank you very much. So firstly, I'd like to invite Alan Borgas to come and propose his motion or speak about his motion. Do we need another microphone? Sorry, yes.
A bit more volume or speak closer to the microphone?
I will speak closer to the microphone, sorry.
Good morning, everybody. Alan Borgas from North Staffordshire Green Party. It is important that we have a minimum amount of green space and tree coverage in our towns because it is crucial for a conducive and healthy living environment, especially for children who've had to deal with horrendous amounts of pollution in our cities, which trees absorb. In Sheffield in particular, trees have been needlessly cut down by the Labour councillor there, simply to save money, even though these trees are crucial for our healthy living. They also make our avenues look nicer, meaning people want to live there as well. Children need green space to escape the dirty air that currently permeates our cities and big towns. And they need green space which is free and available to all, not just rich children living in the fancier neighbourhoods. These are the reasons why I've proposed this motion, to make sure that we can advocate for a statutory minimum of green space and tree coverage in all our towns and cities so that everyone can live in a green and fair city. Thank you.
So, have we got some questions? Right. There's a couple both together there, please. Sorry, can you hear me?
Oh, hello. I thoroughly support the theory.
Yeah. Sorry, yes. Can you
Tamara Galloway, Bromley Green Party. I support the theory, but I think that there could be some rather unfortunate situations where, in places which happen not to have those statutory minimum, you might end up in a situation where you would actually, for example, pull down houses, and I think that might not be helpful. I mean, at the moment, the pressure for development is very much the other way into building housing and other things on green spaces, and so to have situations where you might actually pull down housing to create new green space would be very unfortunate.
Thank you. And the person next.
Hi, my name's Stephen Feber. I'm a Green Party member from Cheshire East. Number one, we need to distinguish between green space and tree cover. They're different. So if you look at Salford, for example, the council will tell you they've got 50% green space, but they've only got 11% tree cover. If you look at the UK, it's 13% tree cover, 19% in Scotland, 10% in England. What we need are more trees. So the Climate Change Committee's ambition to have an extra 3 billion is really what we need to get behind. To the question of urban tree cover, there are huge amounts of space in our cities for planting trees. What the Green Party needs is a practical, costed, thought-through stage plan to plant 6 billion trees across the country, double the tree cover. And that's what we need to create, a proper plan. It's a great ambition, but we need a plan.
I think there's somebody down here first, and then there's a couple at the front.
John Knight, also Cheshire East Green Party. Just responding to the previous, or the first speaker from the floor, making the point about the pressure on local authorities to build housing on the green space. Surely the whole point is to shift the emphasis and to pose an alternative. So which this proposition is clearly doing.
I fully support preserving our existing green spaces. I just think that having a policy where you might find a particular area where there would be pressure to actually pull down housing would be rather unfortunate.
Okay, can we go? There was somebody in. Do you still want to ask a question? This person here. And go on. Okay.
Thanks. One thing I feel that they could do is perhaps to insist that there are many, many roofs. They could put green plants on roofs, like stonecrop, cedar moss. That would photosynthesize, they would photosynthesize and thus change water and carbon dioxide into oxygen and food. And indeed, in some cases, you can even grow trees on rooftops if the rooftops are horizontal. So, I mean, they could use many, many, many acres or hectares, whichever you like to call it, in a city like Sheffield by having far, far more greenery on the rooftops. On the rooftops of skyscrapers, the rooftops of office blocks, or even department store shops. There are rooftops. This sort of thing is done in South London, and it's done to a very, very large extent, indeed, in Singapore. In fact, I've even done a dissertation which includes mention of the rooftops being used for green purposes. Thank you very much. Rob Griffiths from North Staff's Green Party.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Would it be possible for me to quickly?
Go on, we'll let you.
Yeah. I'm Dan Jerome from Trafford Council, and we've already got all party support for a motion we're putting in on tree coverage to increase it by 20% over the next 10 years. And I think one of the most important things is where the trees are sourced from. So we're working with the Woodlands Trust, and they're making sure that they've got a scheme where they make sure the woods are the trees are native, but they're also traceable. So they're not bringing in diseases from across Europe. And one of the things that you will notice that councils buy trees often from the Netherlands, but some of those trees are sourced from China, so they can bring in diseases into this country. So I'd suggest anybody that's a councillor make sure they check where their trees are sourced from. But one of the biggest problems with increasing the trees by 20% is we've got people...
Sorry.
I don't know if the microphone is not working, but we cannot hear anything from here. But anyway, I'll let somebody else speak.
Well, I think partly what happened was it was a little bit... They've got a session next door, apparently, and it was too loud for them, so the tech guy came and just turned it down a bit. Maybe it's gone too far.
Right, sorry. Just a quick training course on microphones. They pick up the sound that is heading towards them. So if you hold it like this, you can't hear it because it's picking up the sound from there. If you hold the microphone like this, it can't hear you. If you hold the microphone like this, it's picking up the sound and it can broadcast. And I have seen Keith Taylor get this wrong on a lot of... So we're not alone.
OK, thank you.
Thank you.
We're back. So, sorry, this person second from the front there.
Hi, Catherine Bart from East Surrey Greens. Linked to the previous point, we would need to consider the species of trees that we're planting and also the aftercare. Obviously, there's no point in planting trees and then they die because they haven't been watered in the first year, or they've been planted in inappropriate places for their eventual size.
Thank you. Somebody at the front. Oh, this person at the front first, and then 2 rows behind.
Hello, I'm John Gollop. I live in St Peter Port in Guernsey, the Channel Island, and I live in Guernsey, St Peter Port, which is in the Channel Islands.
Even closer, I think.
Even
can anybody
closer.
hear me? Because I can't. Oh, yeah.
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
And I'm a tree warden in St Peter Port, but even there, even in Guernsey, we have problems. 2 of our 10 island parishes are named after trees, St Peter and the Wood and the Forest, but the biggest landscape feature of them is a big airport, and there's not enough tree cover even in that cliff top part of the island for squirrels. Little creatures to go from one end of the island to another, so we do need more trees. The thing is, though, there's currently a battle in St Peter Port in a square which actually looks like a triangle, where the municipal authorities, the equivalent of a mayor, is wanting to cut down the tree, allegedly on health and safety grounds, because it's affecting foundations and roots. And representatives in the community are complaining. How do Greens combat the so-called expert who says, well, I love trees, but for various reasons, that the kind of tree or the type of tree or the nature of the trees are blocking some other feature?
Thank you. Is anybody else? Sorry, there's the second row from the front in the aisle.
We already have green space standards in our local plans, and for most wards, it's not even being approached. So how we've got these standards, how do we get them implemented? In terms of tree species, we're running out of time, really. We've got 12 years to save the planet, so we ought to be planting very fast-growing, broad canopy species, like willows, poplars. They need space. We can also do them by just, taking sets from trees, so we can do it on a sort of guerrilla level. Let's go out and do it.
Thank you. I think there's quite a few behind you.
Hello, Teresa Needham, Broxtowe, Green Party. I just wanted to make a point about quite often, if anybody's applied for home insurance recently, quite often there is a question in the insurance that asks you, do you live within so many metres of a tree over a certain height? So I think if we're going to implement more urban tree planting, we need to work with insurance companies to deal and actually look at the mitigating the risks of trees and potentially them falling on houses and things like that. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Lee Hunt-Batch, Tameside Green Party. Going back to the areas for growing trees, there's plenty of areas, even on the it was mentioned rooftop building, there are cities across the world where they've more or less encased or enclosed blocks of flats in trees. So the vertical planting is already established. And also, when you look at the moorland, I mean, round above us we had the moorland fires, and we've had them over across the country. Moorlands are sufficient for planting trees. There's no reason why they can't be planted there. Some people think, oh, it's the altitude. It's nothing to do with that. It's the way they managed. So the space is there. There's absolutely no reason to worry about houses being overtaken by trees.
So can you then go to Martin in the aisle and then the person who's on this side about 5 rows back?
Martin Hemingway, Headingley Green Party. When I first saw this motion when it came in, I thought, oh yes, that's good in itself, but Leeds City Council has 50% green space within its city boundary anyway. But then, when I read it a second time, and obviously read it more closely, it was the word accessible that struck me. And it's the extent to which the motion as proposed fits with our other policies in relation to land access. And does it fit with those policies, and has that been checked by the proposer and PDC? We should have our policies integrated. Obviously, I'd like access to all public open space. I just want to know if it does fit with our policy.
Well, if we just go to the person who I indicated first to make a point, and then we'll go back to the proposer and see if he can answer your question.
Cyril Hugh Jones, Brighton and Hove, Green Party. This isn't so much to the motion, it's more to do with how you get schemes off the ground to encourage more tree planting. And in Brighton and Hove, we've got a scheme which is just about to be launched called Plant Your Postcode. And it's something that one of the local councillors, Leo Lippman, has been working with the Campaign for Rural England Sussex on, and also with a local company which advises other companies as to how to offset their carbon footprint. So they have, and there's also a nursery with about, I'm not sure how many thousand trees that they want to plant. So he's managed to bring these different bodies together. And obviously there's also a lot of enthusiasm among residents to have more tree planting in the city. So I just wonder whether that's a blueprint, if you like, for and could be copied elsewhere in the country.
Right, thank you very much. So if we go back to Alan first to answer Martin's question, and then excitingly we've got a question online, so I'll go to that one before we go to anybody else.
Alan Wargars again. To answer Martin's question, yes, this is partly in conjunction with our policies on land accessibility. I am very pleased that Leeds Green Party Leeds City Council already meets this target. We do need to make sure it's accessible because many green spaces aren't really accessible. As for overdevelopments, yes, I do intend to make sure it is redirected to brownfield sites with this policy, because we do need to stop building on green space. Residents don't own one onto it. It harms our environment, and it therefore harms us. The statutory minimum is generally recommended because it will help ensure we do not get choked by and encouraging policies which increase tree cover. We need to paint a positive vision on how the tree cover will help us. It will help our cities become more vibrant. It will restore biodiversity which has been lost, or create new biodiversity at least, and it will ensure that we've all got somewhere where we can take a breather from all the traffic.
Thank you. I'll just read out exactly what it says on the question that's coming online. It says, Alan, wouldn't urban councils be tempted to take the easy way out, lobby for boundary changes to co-opt lots of trees from adjoining rural areas? I don't know if you necessarily need to answer that one.
This is certainly an interesting question. A lot of the boundaries of councils are out of date in any case, such as those in Norwich. Whilst it is tempting, councils can always find other ways of making sure green space is protected and that tree cover is increased without grabbing land from rural areas. So it is possible to work around this, although it is worth saying that some urban boundaries need to be extended a bit anyway, because practically there are some outlying areas, for example in Nottingham, that are really part of Nottingham, but are still ill within the boroughs of Ashfield and Edling. I mean, like these little bits outside the Broxtowe estate. So it's worth keeping both points in mind regarding that question.
Thank you. And there's quite a few people keep still putting their hands up, and I'd like to get to as many of you as possible. I am aware we've got 15 minutes more in this session, and I've got to do the part about straw polls and indeed whether anybody wants to split the motion or do anything like that. So if I can just take 3 more I can see over there, please.
Lynn Daniel, West Devon Green Party and now Borough Councillor on West Devon Council. I live in a very rural area and I'm absolutely appalled at the way the farmers manage our hedgerows these days. They're cut down to within an inch of their life instead of leaving them to grow every year so that they provide places for the birds to nest and insects and just generally enhance our environment. And I wonder whether we could add something to our motion about that as well, because I know it's partly government policy that farmers manage the hedgerows these days and keep the roads clear, but all of them seem to be absolutely cut down and destroyed, basically. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sally Phillips, Norfolk, Suffolk border. I've got 2 points, if I may, very quickly. The first one is, can we try and plant trees on the marshes all around Suffolk and Norfolk? Because even coming here, last year I counted 400 horses on the marshes and loads of cattle. And they just get put out, and they're out there all weathers with no shelter at all. If we could just put some money into the marshes or get people to take responsibility in shelter for the animals and the trees, we would be doing 2 good things. The other quick point is locally from Norfolk from Norwich to Lowestoft, we've had terrible, huge diesel trains, 2 engines at each side, pulling a little carriage backwards and forwards just from Norwich to Lowestoft. And I've complained to my MP, I've complained to everybody. And gradually it's been lessened, better trains are being brought in. But if I had a car that polluted anything like that train, I would have been put in prison running it for 4 years like that. So can we punish the railways or people like that who do these awful things, ignore pollution, say, right, now you've got to plant 2,000 trees, never mind where, you find a place, but that's your punishment. Can we bring it into a legal system as a punishment for pollution?
Thank you. Right, I can see 2 more over that side, and then we'll go to discussing whether we want to split it.
Derek Morse from County Durham. In County Durham, we've got start again. In County Durham, we've got a number of dreary towns and large villages, completely devoid of any greenery. If the councils are required to provide 30%, 50%, or whatever percentage of space for trees, they'll stick it on the outside of the town. What we need is trees down the high streets of the town, so that when people are out there shopping, they are in a green environment. Now, I can't see that in the motion. Or does anybody have any information or any tips of where authorities have planted trees in the high streets? I can turn round to our local council and say, look, go to the officers in such and such a place. They will tell you how it's done. Okay? Thank you.
Now, of course, a couple more people have stuck their hands up.
Does the Green Party have any answer for the people who say that trees have to be cut down in order for 5G to work? Otherwise, this gentleman's not going to get his trees planted on the high street, because all high streets will want 5G.
Are trees any worse than buildings?
I'm just thinking of Sheffield and so on.
Right, there's a gentleman here, I think he was trying to answer the part of what the previous question was.
Jonathan Vernon, Lewis District, Green Party. In answer to my colleague's question about Durham, I was in Floref in Belgium last week, where they were delighted to say for the first time in their history they had a green town council, a green district council, and a green county council. And over the last 4 or 5 years, they've been doing traffic calming measures around the towns. And what impressed me were two or three things. The first one was the chicanes down the streets are now big enough to hold plants and trees. So the chicane now has trees down the road. The green spaces coming up to roundabouts and between dual carriageways are being planted, so they're getting the trees there. So I think they're doing two things at once. They're bringing trees and growth back into the town, and they're calming the traffic and putting in cycle lanes too. So lots to achieve.
Oh, I'm really just going to have 2 more questions here, and only from people who haven't spoken before.
Hi, Charlie Keller, Cheshire East Green Party. So there's been some good points made about this, and there's been a lot of concerns and contradictory points. So can I ask for a motion to refer this back?
This workshop is just to...
Or just the motion in general?
Right, well, you can propose that. This workshop is to discuss the motion. The decision on the motion is made in a plenary session. What we're doing here is sort of getting feedback and getting and this is why we do the straw poll, is that correct, Martin? To ascertain what the general feeling is. Yeah, do you want just... Sorry, can you give the microphone to Martin, because he's from SOC.
Yeah, the procedural motion to refer back would have to come up again in the plenary session to do that, but we would take a straw poll on it in here.
Yeah.
The other one I wanted to comment on was the suggestion of adding something on hedgerows to this. Nothing can be added at this stage to a motion, but I think it's a really important one and should perhaps come back as a motion to autumn conference to include netting of hedgerows and trees as well.
Right. So, I think I'll start off with asking for a straw poll. So we need somebody to count. Would you be able to count? Do you want to count as well?
I haven't been able to reply to the other questions.
Especially reply to the referral back.
Okay. Yes, just a quick one, Alan, please, because we've got 5 minutes. If you could just answer particularly to the referring back.
To answer the questions I've just received, I mean, no, I don't believe this motion should be referred back. And besides, I posted it rather early on the members' website, giving ample opportunity to suggest amendments and comments on it and how I should shape it. Fundamentally, it is a good motion. How it work out in practice, we can discuss when we elect more Green MPs.
Thank you.
Yes, I mean, our policy set out what we intend to do summarily. I mean, the complex intricacies of how these policies are implemented will be discussed primarily in Parliament and in local councils. Regarding the issue of paying polluters, I mean, the motion partly encourages this anyway by requiring more tree cover and green spaces. And the same will apply for councils. By setting the statutory minimum high enough, they won't be able to just plant it on the outside. They'll have to plant it in the inner town and inner city as well. I mean, that's why I set the statutory minimum tree cover as it is within this motion. I mean, as for 5G, we don't need 5G. We're doing just fine with 4G. I mean, we get good 4G coverage around this country, and except for the areas that still don't have it. This desire for 5G, when 4G technology always works very, very fast, seems rather selfish in some ways. I mean, green space and protecting our environment must come first. This is why we have the precautionary principle in the first place. Because encouraging progress simply for progress' sake is actually harmful to humanity, to environment, and to our fellow creatures. I mean, think before all you encourage new technology. I mean, think about our planet. Think about ourselves. Think about our well-being first and foremost.
Thank you.
So, Barcelona, for example, in Barcelona, they know how to plant trees in the high streets, and they jolly well do.
Right, thank you. Now we're going to go to a vote on whether people would like to refer this motion back. This is just a straw poll that we then report back to the plenary session. This isn't the decision on the motion. Do you want me to read it all out? It's on page 36.
The motion is to refer back.
Yeah.
It means it goes back to those people who proposed it so they can work on improving it and bringing it back to a future conference.
Can observers vote in the straw poll? Are observers allowed to vote in the straw poll?
Yes.
Here.
No observers.
Right. No,
it will still come up, but we'll still need a motion to refer back in full plenary, and full plenary will make a decision. What is being indicated is the view of people who have heard the detailed arguments during the workshop.
Okay, so as I said before, what the workshop is a chance for people to raise points like they have done today, and to discuss the motion, and it's giving an indication to the rest of conference of how people feel about the motion. So if we voted in favour of referring it back, that wouldn't mean that it wasn't going to be discussed in the plenary session. It would still be discussed in the plenary session, and they might decide the other way. So it's just an indication to feedback. So if people could raise their hands if they feel that the motion should be referred back. Six.
11.
6 and 11. Are you counting either side?
No, that's just this side.
Oh, right, so it's 17.
You made it 17.
Well,
Was it
Anne
11
said
your
6,
side?
and you said...
We did just do that again.
Your side, or...
Yeah, let's count in a side each. So how many? Same.
Sorry, I thought I was just counting my side. It was 6 on my side.
And 5 on my side.
So that's 11 altogether, right? Thank you. So that's 11 to refer back, and how many wouldn't refer back? She did it again.
I'm making 4.
I take your vote.
Yes, that's fine.
Just do your side, please.
Okay. Oh, we're doing it again.
Okay. What was this on?
Just counting.
Oh, we've done it. No, we're fine.
Right. Okay. So so that was 11 to refer back and 42 against. Then moving on, if we could have a vote, how you would vote for the motion as it is, for and against. So shall we have for first?
Am I counting all of them?
Count half, count half, count. that a joint?
Yeah, that's the combined.
Right. So are there any against the motion? Okay, so there was 5 against and there was 50 in the room for plus 1 online as well. So that's 51. Does it not? Okay, good job it wasn't a marginal. In brackets, yeah. Okay. Sorry, 5 against. Well, thank you very much for coming. I hope you all attend the plenary when this is discussed in full. Thank you very much. Well, I didn't, yeah, if I didn't know, no. It wasn't, well, the good thing about this session was it was a good one because people were broadly in favour of the concept, it was just the detail.
If you go to our website, there's a link to policy development. It will say they put together groups of people interested in writing a book.
No. I'm not the expert on this part. Yes, sorry.
Can we send it on, please, for the next workshop? You're going to go if you're staying. Quiet.
Who's chairing this one? Can I do it from my seat? Because I'm the proposer. Try it again. I'm proposing it. Yes. Just do it from my seat instead of staying up front.
You can do it. There's not so many scary people here. I'm exactly, this is the first time I've chaired. Just, okay. So if you're just... Yeah.
Oh, I did this last time. So...
Right, thank you everybody. And welcome to the second of the workshops in this session. I would like, first of all, to start with a minute's attunement, please. Could I just have a volunteer from somebody at the back just to close the doors and stay there to make sure nobody comes in? Thank you. All right, well, I'll just have a minute's attunement starting now. Right, thank you very much, everybody. So first of all, just to introduce myself, I'm Anne Forsyth, Headingley and Hyde Park Green Party. Like the people who were here earlier, I'm also, this is the first time I've actually chaired a workshop, and I think Caroline's going to be a bit of a hard act to follow here, though. So, first of all, could I ask if anybody is prepared to be rapporteur for this session, please, to do the report back to the plenary session? Thank you very much indeed. That's great, thank you. What's your name? Oh, so it's Chris, okay, thank you. It's already written down on my notes here, thank you. Is that all right with the microphone? Can I just have a reminder from last time? We had a very good little bit of in-service training. If you have got the microphone and you wish to speak, could you just make sure that you're speaking into it directly? The other thing is, for those of you who weren't in the first workshop, we're trialling some online input, if you like. This has been live streamed, and David here will be taking questions for anybody who's joining us in such as well. We did have some input during the last workshop on that. I hope that's all for the moment. We do have a member of SOC here, where I'm sure will make sure that I'm doing it right, and we're all doing it right. Okay, so could the proposer please... yes, I'm just realised that there's one other thing that I'm going to need, which is somebody to do the roving mic. Thank you very much. I don't know which the roving mic will be. I think it's this one. So perhaps the proposer would like that. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Charlie Keller, Cheshire East Green Party. So this is my motion, and I workshopped it last conference as well, but we didn't actually have time to get it heard because of holistic review. So last time the outlook was generally positive. We had quite a lot of input and improvements, and I took all that feedback and I've improved what this policy motion is. So now it's basically, it says that children up to the age of 13 need to have mandatory British Sign Language education as a second language in schools, and then they can choose to take it as like a further education option up until the age of 16. And I think this would be absolutely amazing for like the deaf community especially, and it would honestly like massively improve what we have at the moment in the Green Party. One question that's also been sort of put to me is, who's going to teach this? And to that, we can have sort of like an interim, like we can get deaf people to teach it, because there's such like a high unemployment rate in the deaf community. So we can actually get deaf people to teach these sign language lessons, and that would increase their employment rates and like bring sign language into our schools. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Charlie. So I now invite questions from anybody about the motion. Right, we have one question from here.
I have seen the difficulties that adults can have actually learning BSL because there's no provision. So I believe it should be done in schools. What is there stopping it at the moment?
Could you introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry, Paul Weaver, South East Dorset.
So what's stopping it at the moment is just funding. We don't have, well, there's not a lot of like courses in high schools and degrees for sign language, but there's also not a lot of funding as well, like to have sign language interpreters. So it's mainly funding and actually getting the education in primary schools and high schools for sign language education. That's the main things that are stopping it at the moment.
Thank you very much. The third row back, fourth row back here. Thank you first.
Graham Rowe, Sheffield Green Party. The other thing that's stopping it, of course, is the national curriculum. It's not on the national curriculum, and schools are very pressurised to just teach that and nothing else, because that's all they've got time to do at the moment.
Do you want to Charlie to make a comment back first?
Just in response to that, So Signature, which is like a deaf charity, they've actually made their own mock curriculum, and the government are actually thinking of introducing sign language as like a GCSE in, I think it's 2022 that they're thinking of doing it, because this government said that they wouldn't introduce any more education changes, but the next government will. Fingers crossed. But we have it ready to go for a curriculum and for like a GCSE, a qualification.
I was about to make the same point. Okay, thank you. There's somebody with a hand up, with a striped top on. Yes? Thank you.
Thank you. Sally Phillips from Norfolk, Suffolk way. I've been a teacher for years, primary school mainly. I'm just wondering, this sounds a really good idea. Would it help children with foreign languages? I mean, if they learn that as of the sign language, I mean, will it help them? English is so hard. I mean, I'm sure they could do both, but is it a way through?
I think Charlie would like to answer that one. Thank you very much.
In short, yes. Basically, the way that British Sign Language sort of is ordered, it's not like English. So, like, we would say, oh, my name is Charlie, but in British Sign Language, it's sort of backwards. So it goes like, name me, Charlie. So, and that's actually very similar to French as well. So if you're writing it down, it's very similar to French. So in short, it will actually help people learn foreign languages if they're learning British Sign Language.
Will it help the foreign children learning English?
It could do, yeah, because some signs are quite easy to learn. So like, that's toilet, and then just like, you can say, oh, I need to go to the toilet. Like, it'll be pretty easy for people to pick up in like primary school, high schools.
There's a hand over here.
Hi, Karen Buckley from Sheffield. I spent all my working life working with children with special needs, from children who are deaf-blind and profoundly impaired to children with physical impairments and the whole range. So I think it's a wonderful idea, but I think we also need to be aware that sign language does need adapting for different people, and that would need to be part of the curriculum, like Makaton, which is a broken down, very basic language for people with severe learning difficulties, and also children with or adults with missing limbs who do one-handed sign language. There's also paired language for children who are deaf-blind and on body signing. So I think it would be wonderful. There's a lot of evidence where people have been doing sign language with babies, that it's helped. Just babies without additional needs has helped develop language. And also people and children who sometimes have a lot of emotional or behavioural difficulties, having some sign language can really help sometimes where words don't work, that they can actually sometimes sign their needs. So yeah, I think it's a wonderful idea with extras added onto it.
I think Charlie can respond to that question. I think this is going very nicely the way it is.
So it would be very, very good to have Makaton and sign-supported English in this policy, but they're both separate languages, if that makes sense. So British Sign Language and Makaton are completely different. Like, they are sign languages, but Makaton's more subjective to an individual's needs, along with like sign-supported English. That's not in like the British Sign Language like word order. So I think it would be really, really good to have this, but this policy is for British Sign Language as a second language in schools. But it would be really, really good to have something about like Makaton and SSE like as a separate policy. So yeah.
John Knight, Cheshire East Green Party. The first question I was going to ask was already asked by someone else, but another point that was raised about question about whether learning sign language would help children whose first language wasn't English. I mean, I was just going to say that basically the ability to acquire language is it's innate in the large majority of human beings, particularly at the younger age, and that ability is only improved by exercise. So if you learn one language, it makes it easier to learn another language. The more your language learning you're doing, the more it helps you to learn other languages. It's let's say, like many other skills, it's improved with practice.
Can I also just say that learning languages is a lot easier when you're younger as well. So it's really, really good to get the British Sign Language in the schools while they're young, learning it up until the age of 13, because it'll stick more in their brains, rather than like learning it as like a level 1 course like 20 years later.
Gentleman, get that t-shirt, yes. Thank you.
Hi, Ronald Stewart, Haringey, Green Party. I work as a teacher, and I just wanted to pick up briefly on the point about the national curriculum. I think as a political party, we should be setting out what we think the national curriculum says. And I think this policy is really great for that. It's providing like a personal way of education in personal communication and inclusive education, and I think those are things that we should really be striving for as a Green Party, and I think this motion is great. Thank you.
I also do want to just comment that the Green Party in itself don't believe in they believe in formal qualifications, but they don't believe in like GCSEs and A-levels as sort of like benchmarkers for education and like SATs and that kind of thing. So I've worded this policy in a way that it sort of avoids those specific like GCSE, A-level, SATs, like qualifications. So we do believe in formal qualifications, and we do believe like in, but so I've worded it in a way where it fits in with the Green Party sort of education guidelines as well, because obviously like we don't believe in like GCSE SATs, but we do believe in some sort of formal qualifications.
Right, thank you. Paul's got another question here, I think.
It's Paul Weaver, South Dorset. The figures suggest that teaching BSL in schools to under 13s would be more beneficial to children than teaching a foreign language, given the amount of people that actually do go to foreign countries and use the languages. Would you agree? Would you basically agree with that? Because I think that's an important thing to consider when looking at this motion.
I definitely would agree with that, because not a lot of people can afford to go to like foreign countries, but obviously people can afford to travel around their local area. And there's about 151,000 people in the UK that use British Sign Language on a daily basis, whether they are profoundly deaf or whether they're a family member of somebody who's deaf as well. So it would definitely be an amazing thing to get this policy into like the Green Party education policies, because a lot more people in the UK would be using this more than like French, for example.
I think, yes, I think you had a hand up first.
Rob Nunny, Manchester Green Party. Would you propose that BSL were taught instead of a foreign language, or do you think that they could both work together? Because as a Green Party, we also think that we are for free movement, we pro-EU, and so learning a foreign language is also very beneficial too.
So this is a policy amendment, so it's building on what our current policy is. So I've basically just inserted, you will have to learn British Sign Language, mandatory, until the age of 13 as a second language in schools. In the policy, it actually says they'll learn a wide range of languages from the age of 7, which must include English up until the age of 16 and British Sign Language as a second language until the age of 13. And if you're in Wales, it also includes Welsh. So it'll be alongside learning foreign languages in schools. So you'll be learning English, you'll be learning British Sign Language, you'll be learning Welsh if you're in Wales, but you'll also be learning foreign languages because those are really, really helpful to kids to understand as well.
Question here, and then one here first, and then...
I'm not a member, I'm just an observer today, so I'm not sure what the policies are already. But my last job was as an advisory teacher, looking at inclusion for children with physical disabilities. And I'd come across children who were signing away and the teachers didn't know what they were saying. So would it be appropriate in this policy to say that it also enters teacher training, because we have a lot of children included. I worked for Derbyshire last time and there was a very pro-inclusion policy with a lot of children signing or doing Makaton, and really if the teachers don't understand them it's all a bit lost.
Charlie,
Well, I was actually going to propose another policy which included teachers having to learn sign language up to a certain level, but unfortunately I've just been really busy with my A-levels, which don't actually finish until next week. So yeah, I was actually going to propose another policy, but I just haven't got round to it yet. So this is like the first step, because we don't actually have any policy in the Green Party about British Sign Language specifically. So this would be the base for a whole range of policies, which I'm hoping to get written up by the next conference.
Thank you. All right. There's another question there, halfway back.
Hello, I'm Emma Chan from Haringey Green Party. There have been a few questions about should we teach sign language instead of a foreign language? Will this compete with the exam, sort of examinable content from the national curriculum, that kind of thing? I work with children in a sexual health context, so one of my roles is I'm a sex ed facilitator, and that's another sort of area of, I think, of the curriculum that tends to be neglected because it's not examinable, it's not testable, it doesn't lead to formal qualifications, even though I think it's absolutely vital for young people. I think we need to stop seeing education and as a consequence of that the national curriculum as a sort of zero-sum game. We can have all of these things, we just need to protect them and fight for them and legislate for them. So I guess my question is, do you feel that that legislation like this is an opportunity to sort of take that stance and to promote that approach?
Yes.
So, off the top of my head, I don't actually think the Green Party believes in the national curriculum. But I do think that this policy is vital, and it's something that kids should know. As much as like sexual health, as much as knowing how to do taxes and that kind of thing, because I'm still in education. I'm in sixth form, and I was never taught any of these things. I had to learn these by myself, and I honestly think this kind of thing, and maybe even PHSCE education. So although sign language should be mandatory, and obviously learning about sexual health, that should also be mandatory, but at the moment they're only in PHSCE, and whereas it shouldn't. It should be stuff, we should be learning life skills, not just, you need to revise a streetcar named Desire for your GCSE exams and then just forget all about it within a month. This should be setting us up for the future, because this is what we're going to have to deal with when we become adults.
Thank you. There's three other questions. The person in the striped top, first of all.
Hello, I'm Elaine Francis from South Tyneside Green Party. It's a bit of a comment rather than a question, really. I worked in early years and with sort of around child protection for quite a long time. And in the early years provisions I was in, they were quite good with younger children. There was a couple of children we had, and I had to request Makaton training. But there are quite a lot of early years provisions that actually do really well at introducing other languages and things, you know. The thing that frustrated me was when they left at age 5 or 6 or whatever, they didn't get anything else until they entered sort of comprehensive school or whatever. So I love the element of this that means that you're carrying it right on through to the age of 13. I think that's super important. I just want to echo what Ronald said as well. You know, I think it's a brilliant thing to do, Charlie, so thank you so much for bringing it up. Thank you.
Right, thank you. The person behind you, that was a comment rather than a question, so to save your legs as well with the roving mic.
Thank you. Sue Dumpleton from Sheffield. I really like the idea of learning sign language throughout school and all the other things that it would be great to learn, but school can't teach everything. And I just wanted to add, it's turning more into a comment than a question. Well, what do people think about the idea that school is there to give us the basics, be able to learn to read, to communicate, to research, and then learning is a lifelong situation? That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Do you want to answer that? Yeah. Right, okay, and then there's one here.
I just want to sort of echo my previous point where learning languages at an early age is the best time to learn languages. So although you're always constantly learning, languages, especially at a young age, is the best time to be learning languages, which is why I think this is mandatory for schools.
David Newman, Oxfordshire Green Party. In Mauritius, there are people who speak 13 languages. Dans le peuple cause créole, ils enseignent en créole et apprennent le français, and when they've learned, and then they're taught English and learn everything in English, and then they can learn the language of their parents, Hakka, Cantonese, Bhojpuri, Tamil, Telugu. And the interesting thing about that is that in each language they learn some other subjects. Is there something that people could learn in BSL?
That's quite a specific question.
There's a lot that you can learn in BSL. So when you start off learning the basics, you learn stuff like colours. So if we were introducing this in sort of like primary schools, when they're learning sign language, they could start to learn colours as well. And obviously, like, I never got any like sign language courses. I taught myself, but I also set up like the sign language club at my high school. So I sort of followed the signature curriculum, which is the one that they've set up to be implemented by the government, hopefully in 2022. And that teaches us like the weather, like how to talk about the weather in sign language, numbers, letters, like it follows this like chronology of stuff, basically, just everything in English. But also because BSL is its own language, it has its own sort of like tendencies to, it has its own like richness in the way that it's used. So although it's use it for English, like it also has its own sort of culture. So new things can be learnt from British Sign Language because it is its own language. Yeah.
Right. The timing in this, we've got another 10 minutes. Are there any more comments made? I found this an extremely interesting discussion with lots and myself as a now retired secondary teacher. Thank you very much for bringing this because it is really important. I now tutor, in fact, and one of my tutees was potentially going to need tuition using British Sign Language, and I actually signed up to a course. I actually haven't had time yet to do it, but I do intend to. So thank you very much for this. Actually, it does look as though there's one or two. So does anybody else want to make any more comments or ask Charlie any more questions about this? I'll take the question from there. Thank you.
Julia Clark, Wigan and Lee. I was thinking I could maybe answer the question about the subject and the content. So I thought each language kind of gives you a different way of expressing things, and the fact that you obviously use your hands, is a whole other way of kind of expressing yourself. So the content and the subject that it brings you is this new means of expression that I think is kind of a lot of the benefits with sort of Makaton for toddlers, children, in kind of communicating in a way. And we all like learn and communicate differently anyway, so it's offering that. So I thought maybe rather than kind of subject, like different information, it's that kind of aspect perhaps.
Thank you. Did you want to respond to that or not?
No, just agree.
Okay. Did you, there was something else you wanted to say? Okay.
I feel a bit greedy keeping getting this. I keep thinking of another point when I've spoken. One is that there's a lot of children that to do BSL you need good fine motor and certainly upper body gross motor skills. So I still think it's a wonderful idea, but I do think we need to take into account when it's taught. There's a lot of children with dyspraxia in our schools. There's a lot of children with physical disabilities and other disabilities, and we do need to be aware that BSL, really good fine motor and gross motor at the top. But that's not to say it's not a great idea, it's just that in the teaching of it, we need to be aware of that, I think. Thank you. Thanks, I won't have it anymore.
Do you want to give it to Charlie? And then I'll take this one last question then.
Paul Weaver. I was just going to make a comment about what the lady spoke previously said. I know people that have severe learning difficulties that have found the targeted learning that BSL gives you, find that very good way of communicating. Not necessarily people that are deaf or deafened. It's a way people that have. Well, I'm autistic myself, and I am learning BSL at the moment, very slowly, because I'm learning it self-taught. But I have found it concentrates my mind on the task in hand, and that is something you need when you're learning in school.
Right. So I don't see any more questions and comments from the floor. Oh, sorry, there is one. Sorry, somebody has not spoken before. Sorry. The lights are down. I'm glad to say that we've only got lights here, so it's not been terribly easy to see everybody.
Thanks for that. Steve Leyland from Blythe Valley. It's really a comment, and the point is that to a certain extent, I don't know that we should be tying it to purely a disabled perspective. There have been a number of occasions where British Sign Language, or at least the use of it for perfectly able-bodied people in silent scenarios, is excellent. And, just to say that realistically that should be something that could be easily added to the agenda of adding it to the Green Party corpus. Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you.
I think it's an excellent idea, by the way.
Thank you. Right, well, thank you very much. So we've got 5 minutes left, so I'll, if Charlie, would you like to just sort of sum up where we're at, and then we will take a straw poll so that with the reporting of that can go back to the plenary when this will be debated.
So basically, last time when I did this, last conference in Bristol, in our straw poll, I think, well, Chris, you were reporting, so it was about 20 people in favour, nobody against. But there was comments about it does need to be learnt as a second language, just to clarify that. So that's what I've changed it this time to include a second language, as a second language. And so basically, kids up to the age of 13 will learn mandatory British Sign Language if this passes. Well, if the Green Party had a government, then then kids up to the fingers crossed. Yeah, then kids up to the age of 13 will learn mandatory British Sign Language and have the option to continue that on for a formal qualification at the age of 16. Hopefully we'll get deaf people to teach it, because quite often deaf people can speak. Some people have learned English and then later on in life have become deaf or profoundly deaf. So quite a lot of people who are deaf can read lips, they can speak English perfectly, and you'd never be able to tell that they were deaf. And also, going back to the point about in silent environments as well, it would be also really, really good to know British Sign Language, especially like, because I was in the bar last night and it was really loud, couldn't hear anything. So it would be really, really good to just say, oh, I want a drink. Like, it's not that difficult to, yeah, pint, yeah. 1 pint, 2 pints. So, yeah, it can be applied to so many different environments, not just for the deaf community. And having that education would be so, so beneficial to a lot of people. So, I've got like a list of like potential questions and answers, and I think we've covered it all. In making this policy as well, I actually consulted various people and various bodies, but I just didn't have time to get it accredited. So if it was accredited, then it would actually not be in like the E motions. It would be, I don't even know what motion it would, but it would be high. Yeah, it would be C, and it would be higher up on the agenda. But anyway, I didn't have time. But I have consulted people when writing this. So I spoke to the National Deaf Children's Society. I spoke to the Deaf Association. I spoke to Anne Gillings, who her son is profoundly deaf, and he's actually leading the campaign to have a GCSE in British Sign Language. So I spoke to her because she was in the news last year about getting that done. And I also spoke to Ben Fletcher, who is a deafblind member of the Green Party, who stood for election in Putney in 2017. So I have consulted various people and various charities to just make sure that what I'm doing is the correct thing for the deaf community.
Thank you very much, Charlie. So we do need to take a straw poll as to whether this, what the feeling is of this workshop to report. If I could have somebody to count. Does it need? Okay, Alan, thank you. If you'd like to do it, Martin's going to do it as well. Just find out what you need to count first. I got it wrong last time. Right.
First counting votes for. Just that side, Alan, and I'll do this.
Yeah. So if you would be supporting this motion, could you please raise your hands? Thank you. Twenty-eight. Thank you very much. And anybody against this? Well, thank you very much, everybody. It's been extremely interesting. I think we've gone into this in great depth. Thank you very much, Charlie, for bringing it. And good luck for the rest of your A-levels as well. That doesn't... yeah, okay. Okay, side note, I will. Yes, I'll pass that to... Good call.